Hey all, I am Danya Divagar. Once again a warm welcome to my channel Shades of Literature. Thanks to all for subscribing my channel and also for leaving your valuable comments. So last class I just gave you a brief introduction to post-colonial literature and the term post-colonialism. So today as I promised you in the last class that I'll be doing post-colonial theorists and their key terms. So as to keep up my promise, in this session I'll be dealing with few post-colonial theorists and the major concepts which they coined. This would help, these concepts which those theorists have coined helps us to understand post-colonial literature in a much broader sense. So today I'll be doing major theorists and their key concepts. So what does a post-colonial text mainly aims at? A post-colonial text mainly aims at or mainly studies or mainly focuses on the oppression, suppression and the adaptation which happened after the colonial rule. How people or how colonized people adapted to the impact which was left over by the colonizers. So this is what any post-colonial narrative looks for. And in order to understand about these suppression, oppression, the impact and the adaptations, the resistance. So in order to understand about all these things, we need to understand certain other key terms coined by famous theorists. So in the first person, when you think about post-colonial theory, the first person or the prominent figure in the post-colonial theory would be Homi K Bhabha. He is an Indian English scholar and a critical theorist. So when you think about the contemporary post-colonial theories, he is one of the most prominent figures. He has coined terms such as hybridity, ambivalence and mimicry. So I'll be explaining what hybridity is. So for example, you just imagine the settlers coming to our land. For example, the Britishers came to India. What did they do initially? They just came, they imposed their culture upon us forcefully. We were not so interested, we were not so keen in following their culture, but we were forced to follow their culture, their religion, their kind of food, their kind of thoughts, everything. We were not so interested in their culture or the way they live. We had our own culture, but what did they do? They just forced certain things upon us. And this continued for years. Even though we didn't like, we were forced to do so. So we just tried to copy or we just tried to come into their culture in one way or the other. But later on what happened? They just left us and we were just left like that, hanging midway. So what happened there? We already had a culture earlier and now somebody else, an alien force comes into our nation and they are forcing us to follow their ways and their methods. And we tried to do that, but in some way or the other we just failed to do, but yet we try. A resistance is there. We always resist. We have always resisted this kind of forced things which were imposed on us. So after that what happened? After when Britishers left, what happened was we had a culture, mixed culture. What kind of culture we had? We already lost ours. The culture which was forced on us, we didn't accept it fully and we just can't go back into our old culture. So there comes the importance of the term hybridity. Hybridity is transcultural mix which happens after cultural exchanges. So this is the first term coined by Homi K Bhabha. So hybridity, it's a most important term when you think about Homi K Bhabha and his post-colonial theory. Recently, I happened to hear a lecture given by a doctor. The doctor was speaking something about the food habits which we Indians follow. It's like a customary thing for us. Whenever we get a cold or a fever, we tend to take something hot with bread or bun. Isn't so? We are more having a liking towards baked like bread, bun, burgers and all. So he was just talking about this new trend which is coming up amongst the youngsters today. Now it has totally changed. When earlier and all, if it was bread, now this has totally changed to burgers and all kinds of fast foods. The story now, it's totally different. We are in somewhere in a lost kind of culture now. So he was just speaking about this food habits which nowadays people follow. So it's like a mandatory thing for us. Whenever we get some cold or cough, we just take some hot drink along with it bread. So we have this thing imprinted in our mindset, okay, if you take bread you will feel better. But the doctor was saying that no, why should we take bread? Why should we copy our colonizer? During earlier days, during the British Raj, what happened was, it was mandatory or it was customary for the doctors to give their patients who got admitted in their hospitals, they used to give 2 slices of bread plus a glass of milk. They had to take it. So those days the patients were very happy because we were not that much exposed to new methods of Britishers, and we were happy to get something free of cost. So we never thought about the impact which this would leave on our very culture those days. We never thought about it. But when you just think about it now, it was all pre-planned, and now we are not able to get over it. We are still copying, we are still following the same things. We need not take bread and hot milk. We have other food. You can take idli, we can have dosa, you can have any other food cooked at your home for that matter. It's not mandatory to take bread or something like that. So here comes the importance of the term mimicry. What are we doing? We are just trying to imitate the colonizers in the aspect of food. And now coming to dress. You just think about the jeans that we all use. This doesn't suit our climatic conditions. In a country like India, where you have extreme cold and extreme hot weathers, so for our climatic conditions, this kind of dress will not suit. Obviously, during summer season, we have extreme hot climate over here, and we see people wearing jeans and they just roam around. But this is something very much different when you go to any other European country. There they have a heavy winter. So there it's okay for them to wear such kind of dress, but it's not okay for us to wear it over here. What are we doing then? We are just copying, or we are just imitating the colonizer. Isn't so? And now just think about all those cosmetics, all those beautifying things which is available in the market. It's been already imprinted in our minds that if you don't put makeup on your face, you will not be looking good. Or beauty has been now coined in the terms of these makeup. It was not like that earlier. We had our own pure ethnic kind of beauty. So now it's all changed. I belong to Kerala. So 10 years back, I still remember people hardly used to use lipsticks. And now after 10 years, when I just go out and when I just see people, I can see lots of women, they have started using lipsticks. So where did all this come from? We are just imitating somebody else, right? It's not mandatory for us to follow these things. Okay, it's upon us to decide what we should do and what not to do. But there is an inner layer where you should think about all these things. Yes, we are imitating our colonizers. So here comes the importance of the term mimicry. Mimicry is just copying the colonizers by ways of culture, religion, language, and everything. And the third term would be ambivalence. What is ambivalence? Ambivalence is the ambiguous way in which the colonizer and the colonized regard each other, how both of them address each other. The colonizer always address the colonized people, that means the inhabitants, the indigenous people, as raw, weird, uncivilized people. Okay, and how would we in the sense the inhabitants or the indigenous people or the natives, how would the natives address the colonizer? How would we address them? We address them as intruders who have come to our land as intruders. Okay, so these are the three terms coined by Homi K Bhabha They are hybridity, mimicry, and ambivalence. And what do these terms tells us more about? These terms tells us more about the resistance which we had from our side. He is also speaking about stereotyping. What do you mean by stereotyping? Stereotyping is you would like hide the reality and you will show something else. Like a colonizer making fun of the colonized people using cheesy words. Okay, so that would be an example for stereotyping. So he has used these many key concepts in his post-colonial theory. Now coming to the next most prominent theorist in post-colonial theory. It is none other than Edward Said, and he has written a most famous classic book named Orientalism, and it was published in the year 1978. What do you mean by Orientalism, or from which term did Orientalism come up? So Orientalism has derived from the word Oriens, which means rising sun in the east. So Orientalism was a term coined by Edward Said in order to address the east. So now two things have come up. The first is west and the east. What is this west and what is this east? West is the superior power who has everything in their hands. They are civilized. They have their own culture, they are powerful, they have lots of money, they are polished people. Okay, so these are the connotations or terms which you can give to the west. And now coming to the east, how can you address the east? East is uncivilized always, and east is weird. East is not that powerful as west is. So these are the certain things or certain terms which you can attribute with east. So in Orientalism, Said is talking about this west and the east. The west is given a name that is Occident and the east is Orient. East is addressed as Orient. So you have got two terms, the west as Occident and the east as Orient. So he is speaking about the assertion of power by the Occidents on the Orients, means how they imposed power and how they forced their culture upon the east. That is what Said is speaking in his book Orientalism. And there are other things also coming up. He has also coined the term the other. What do you mean by the other? And now there is yet another connotation. There is a difference between us and the other. What do you mean by us? Us means the West, the Europeans, the settlers, and the other, which is out of the box. So the other means the east or the colonized. So the other is a term which has been coined by, or which has been used by Said in his book the Orientalism. And you should understand the difference between the east and the west. The east is given a status of uncivilized, barbaric kind of people, whereas the west is superior, powerful in all aspects. Now comes the next concept, which is termed as binary difference. What do you mean by this binary difference? Binary difference is nothing but the difference or the gap between this east and the west. You should always remember, west is somewhere else here and east is somewhere else down over here. So you have a huge gap between this west and the east. Or that is how the west has already made the other parts of the world, or how the west has made the other parts of the world believe, how they look down upon the east. So this thing is already there, and this division is called binary division. And about this binary division, Said is speaking in his book Orientalism. He also speaks about how Orientalism is institutional. He speaks about fantasy. What is this fantasy? During earlier days, when Britishers came to rule India, when they came to India as traders, what did they think about India? They already had this thought in their mind that India is a land of snake charmers. okay, and people just elephants running on the roads. We are like uncivilized, barbaric kind of people. Even the very single thing, you can just, I've heard people talking about few of my relatives and friends who are staying abroad. They are saying, why should we come back to India? India is like, we doesn't have many facilities over here. We are getting everything over there. Why should we come back to India then? So this is the kind of mindset. Those people who went from our very land, they are speaking like this. Okay, so you should think about the impact of colonization. It has reached somewhere else. It's not just stopped over here. It is going to other levels. We are lost. We are in a lost world now. So that's what Fanon says. So you just think about it. Now, coming back about the binary division and Orientalism is institutional. I already told you that. Now coming to the fantasy. So this is how the West has fantasized their colonies, how it would be. So what happened was they promoted literatures when East wrote things about their country, the West, they just promoted all this. Also they started, this fantasy thing became a subject for the West to address the East. They started writing about the East, keeping in mind all these fantasy things. Okay, so new forms of literatures happened there also. So it was self-perpetuating also. So Orientalism is self-perpetuating, it is discursive. So all these things you should keep in mind when it comes to Edward Said's now just summing up both these two theorists whom we discussed today, Homi K Bhabha and Edward Said. Homi K Bhabha talked about the three terms which he coined, that is hybridity, ambivalence and mimicry. He was talking about those three terms and how this is related to post-colonial theory, and he also spoke about stereotyping. And now coming to Edward Said, he spoke about the East and the West, how the Occident, that is the West, thinks about, or how and what the Occident thinks about the Orient, that is the East. He also speaks about the concept of the other. Okay, and then about binary division, how the literature is, how the Oriental literature is institutional and how it is self-perpetuating. Also, Orientalism discusses about the theme of fantasy or the factor of fantasy and how the West tried to include these fantasy elements into their writings, how the West thought about the East. So all these things Said is speaking in his book, The Orientalism. So for today, we'll discuss, we have already discussed these two authors or these two writers, these two theorists. I'll come up with more key concepts and more theorists in my next lecture. Until then, bye from me. Take care. Have a safe time at your house. Subscribe my channel. Please do give your valuable comments in my comment box, and please don't forget to ping on the bell button so that you will get notified whenever I upload a new video. Until then, bye bye and thank you.